This video is brought to you by BetUS Sportsbook and Casino.
Today by BetUS. Go check out the link down below for all of your online gambling needs this year. And we're going to be jumping into the second part of our 53-man preview and talking about the defense. So reminder, I wanted to give you guys some 53-man roster predictions going into the preseason before we see some of these guys and see some of the movers and shakers that are inevitable. We know some of these UDFAs are going to pop. A couple guys on defense just to be on, kind of heads up for. That we're going to go through. So I'm going to highlight those guys, talk about some of the losses, some of the guys stepping into new starting roles, and all that good stuff. So do me a favor, hit that like button, hit subscribe if you're new here, and drop a comment down below. Let me know what you guys think about my 53-man roster prediction coming up here at the end. And once again, thank you to BetUS for sponsoring this video. Let's jump right in, starting on the defensive line. And, this D-line really shows what I mean when I say, yes, the Ravens have quite a few losses in terms of key players, guys like Jadeveon Clowney, Patrick Queen, those kind of guys. But this roster is pretty darn intact, and this D-line really sets the tone. You look at the top line. This is their starting kind of five-man rotation from last year. Justin Madubuike coming off an all-pro season, absolute breakout, getting that big contract, setting himself up as a premier pass rusher last year. You got Michael Pierce coming in as the one tech, just that kind of hard hat, lunch pail, blue collar worker, going to come in, going to push the pocket, going to shut down the run. Travis Jones, who is my breakout candidate. He showed you guys, if you guys follow me on Twitter, if you guys follow me on here, I've highlighted so many flashes. It's all going to be about him consistently putting it together. And I think this is the year. I think those three together form one of the best Ravens interior D-lines that they've had in quite some time. I really think they can do it. I think they can play all three together because of Travis Jones' athleticism, what they can do with Madubuike when they want to go into those three down lineman sets. I think those three can come in because you got the two heavies with Jones being athletic enough to play the three tech. Madubuike, we've seen him play over tackle. We've seen him play outside tackle. And I really think those three can come together and do some special things. We got Brent Urban coming back, my fellow Canuck, friend of the program. He's been so solid as a vet. He's going to rotate in. He's going to make plays. He did it in every game last year. I absolutely love shouting it out on Twitter, just because I love how hard he works. He's a guy that's extended his career with that rotational ability. And then there's a guy coming in, Broderick Washington, and I'd have to take a look at the contract situation. But this is a guy that, and I'm usually pretty positive about the Ravens, but this is a guy that's been a disappointment to me, quite frankly. His contract isn't cuttable this year. It's not even really cuttable next year, maybe as a post June 1st. But he's a guy that I don't think's played up to that kind of I think his AAV is around $4 million. Like they're spending a decent amount of money on Broderick Washington, and I just don't think they're getting that value. So that's a guy that I'd really love to see step up. When you're paying, I'm just looking now, 5.2 APY. When you're paying that kind of money, that's not insignificant money. That's money that could have gone in to retaining a Jadeveon Clowney, right? Those mid-level contracts can stack up. I know why they did it. They did it because they didn't have Madubuike signed. They didn't know what was going on with Michael Pierce health-wise. If Madubuike had walked in free agency, if Pierce hadn't been able to get healthy, this preview would be looking at right now would look a lot different. So that's why they did it. So I understand it from that perspective, but it's a guy that I frankly want to see more out of. And I really hope steps up his game. His OTC valuation last year was 1.9 million. That seems about right. That kind of rotational, just above replacement level player. But I think when you're paying that kind of money, you want to get more. So I know it's a little critical, but I just want to see more out of him. Moving into the guys that will be competing for practice squad spots, I think it's going to be hard to push any of these five out of their spot due to contract status and just continuity. They're going to just kind of bring back the same five-man rotation with health pending. But what I noticed is they brought in two veteran guys, which, coming in, competing for the practice squad spots. They got Deidrin Sanat, former third-round pick to the Falcons. He's going into his seventh NFL season, spent time with the Falcons and the Bucks, throwback run-stuffing nose tackle, and will kind of provide that depth behind Pearson Jones, very viable practice squad candidate. They always kind of carry D linemen like that because, those guys that get banged up as the season go through, they want to try and manage snaps when they can. So a guy that could really factor into that competition. And much like Sanat, Josh Tupou, a guy that I'm quite familiar with, just kind of studying the O-line for the Ravens because he's been a defensive tackle for the Bengals since 2017. UDFA, spent his entire career there. They kept kind of bringing him back on and off practice squad, played in some games last year. So, some safety nets there. And guys that I actually think Josh Tupou is quite effective. So, it's going to be really interesting how they can kind of play in the preseason. They're going to get some of those, starter snaps when we're resting starters. And this is why the Ravens compete so well in the preseason. They get vets like this that are just high quality players, guys that are probably going to be able to end up on a 53-man roster by the end. And they're playing against, UDFA's backups, guys that won't have a job in a few weeks. Then the guy that I really want to talk about is CJ Ravenel. This is a guy that I've heard a lot of buzz from camp. A lot of the reporters that are there singing his praises, a guy that's, making a lot of noise getting into the backfield. UDFA out of Missouri Western, classic Ravens defensive UDFA from a small school that can make a big impact. And he kind of fits that 5-tech mold at 6'5", 280. He'll push Brent Urban, and he comes in kind of a similar body, not quite as tall, but, it's kind of like that Calais Campbell 5-tech body, right? Again, Calais Campbell is more Brent Urban size, but taller, thinner, that type of player. So excited to see what he can do. I've been hearing a lot of that buzz, and he strikes me as that kind of guy that can blow up the preseason and get the fan base talking about him. And then Tramel Welther, a guy that spent 5 seasons at the University of Georgia. He went there after JUCO. He's an older UDFA, played 13 games last season, started in 5, finished his career with 49 tackles, 2 sacks, helped the Bulldogs obviously win back-to-back titles. So I don't know what he's going to be able to bring to the table. I haven't studied him a ton, but a guy that kind of has that winner's pedigree, would be familiar with Todd Monken from his time in Georgia. And, coming from, it's an interesting story, right? Because he could have been buried behind those deep D lines that Georgia had. So I'm really interested to see if he can take his game to the next level here in the NFL. And, the big question is, are you guys ready to take your game to the next level? Look no further than BetUS, your ultimate destination for all things sports betting. They offer the fastest payouts in the industry, so you won't be waiting around when you hit that big win. And most importantly, you can get a 125% deposit bonus on your first 3 deposits up to $2,000. Fast and easy service, 24/7 personalized service, 365 days a year. Super important with sports betting because some of these companies, you try calling in the middle of the night, you're trying to cash in one of those big bets, you can't get a hold of someone. And they don't just offer the basics. You can get live wagering in all major sports, best betting variety in the business, 10% back on all net losses twice a year, and personalized account manager. So go check them out. Click the link down below. Obviously, I'm taking a look at what I think is maybe one of the best returns on investment for this Ravens team preseason. If you were looking at kind of props, and that's the Defensive Player of the Year award. Obviously Micah Parsons, TJ Watt, Myles Garrett are always in that conversation, but at 3,500 odds, you throw some money on Kyle Hamilton. I know I'm going to be. That could be a really interesting case. He's one of those guys that can, make pop plays, and we saw it plenty last year, and a guy that could really get himself into that conversation for the amount of things he can do in a defense. So I think I'd go ahead and take a look at that. Moving into the outside linebacker edge competition, we got, again, some familiar faces. Not a whole lot of competition here. You got Odafe Owe, Kyle Van Noy, your returning starters. Owe will step into that kind of full-time rush role that he kind of split with Jadeveon Clowney last year. I'm going to miss Clowney. He was probably one of my favorite players to study in the last 5 years. I just absolutely loved watching him play every week. Going to miss him, but excited to see what Owe can do. It's a lot like Rashad Bateman. We're waiting for the breakout. We can all see how it can happen, but it's on our way to go out there and prove it. So I'm excited to watch him. I'm excited to watch Kyle Van Noy coming back as a returning Sam. He kind of rejuvenated his career here, especially from a pass rushing perspective. And he's talked about it quite a bit since the season ended, just how well he fit in this defense, how well he fit with the coaching staff, how empowered he felt. So excited to see what he can do, support some of these young lads. And obviously the big conversation, the guy that we need to see pop, the guy that we're sick of waiting for, is David Ojabo. 2 years ago, took him off that Achilles tear that he had suffered at the combine or his pro day, might have been his pro day, and then gets hurt again last year. And it's kind of looking like one of those stories where he just can't get on the field. So I think he can be very effective, but man, we got to see him get on that field. So really excited to see what he can do. Hoping we can see some pop plays. Tavius Robinson, another Canadian that I'm pulling for, kind of that Courtney Upshaw vibe of that edge setter. I think he can slide inside, do a little pass rushing inside the tackle, over the tackle, that sort of thing. But really excited to see what he can do in year 2. He's one of those guys that I think is going to become an unsung hero, much like fellow Canadian Brent Urban. Absolutely love what he's been able to do, and showed a lot last year. Maybe not as much from the pass rushing perspective, but he showed a lot as a run stuffer, a guy that can set the edge hard, take no bullshit out there. And, I'm excited to see what he can do going into year 2. Adisa Isaac, a guy that has been hurt. And this was a controversial pick. It was one of the most criticized pick that the Ravens made. And fans are going to be frustrated if he's not able to get on the field. So, again, it's a lot like a David Ojabo thing. I can't really say anything negative about his play. Nobody can. But we got to get out there. We got to get playing. We got to get snaps. So hopefully he's able to get back out there, play consistently. But this is looking like a stacked group. And, you get Malik Harrison in there, much like Tavius Robinson. He's a core special teamer, a hard edge setter. They re-signed him. I actually thought they might let him walk because Tavius Robinson was kind of filling that role as a guy that could play all special teams, set the edge, but Malik Harrison also brings that inside linebacker ability. So the Ravens love that versatility, love getting him out there on special teams. So he's going to probably command a roster spot. Then you get 2 guys that are kind of competing against the returners and the draft picks, and that's Quincy Roach, who they just signed when Malik Ham got hurt. I was really excited to see Malik Ham. Absolutely loved him last preseason. Thought he balled out. Seeing him end up on IR, he's out for the entire year. That's devastating. It's kind of like a Keaton Mitchell thing where I really thought those were 2 UDFAs that could make an impact this year, and both of them kind of starting the year hurt. Just it sucks. It takes away from that depth. So Quincy Roach is going to come in. He spent a couple of seasons with the Steelers, Giants, Vikings. A guy that I was really interested in during the 2021 draft. Really explosive first step, Miami Hurricane, but just hasn't been able to put it together and has mostly spent time on the practice squad. So a guy that I think will get a lot of run opposite this other UDFA that's getting a lot of buzz in camp, and that's Joe Evans. Undersized pass rusher from Iowa, but a guy that's your typical blue-collar hard worker, explosiveness. It's all going to be about how can he transition to the next level. He's undersized. I think he comes in at like 6'1". So one of those undersized edge players. But he led Iowa last year with 9.5 sacks, 10 pressures, 13.5 tackles for a loss. Second team All Big Ten recipient, posted 28 career sacks, which is 4th all time in Iowa history. So a guy with a ton of production, just a good football player. We talk about this every year. There'll be guys that have traits and no production, and there'll be guys that have production and limited traits. And Joe Evans is definitely in the latter category. So it's all going to be about, how much butter can he get against NFL competition? And like I said, with some of these guys having roster spots kind of locked up, I think you're going to see a ton of Quincy Roach and a ton of Joe Evans. Hopefully we can get a Adisa Isaac out there because huge opportunity in these preseason to quiet some fans, quiet the criticism, and really prove himself. Moving into the inside linebacker competition, obviously Patrick Queen has been a much talked about departure, going to the rival Pittsburgh Steelers, talking a lot of trash on Twitter. And we'll look to last year's 3rd round pick, Trent Simpson, stepping into that will linebacker spot beside Roquan Smith. I think this is a pretty typical, next man up scenario. I think they saw they can get 80% of Patrick Queen with 20% of the contract to Trenton Simpson on his rookie deal. It's all going to be about, can Trent Simpson provide that 80%? And that sounds like a lot. Patrick Queen played really well. So 100% of Patrick Queen is, Pro Bowl type player. So can Trent Simpson make that step early? He's got the same type of explosiveness. I think he can be very effective as a blitzer, much like Patrick Queen was, but how much can he diagnose blocks, get off blocks, make plays in the run game like Patrick Queen did? We saw those vicious stunts with Roquan Smith and Trent Simpson. I think he's going to take a really good step into those. That's kind of his strength. And he plays pretty well in coverage. So how well can he cover those running backs? How many times do we see Patrick Queen give up a running back wheel route? So how can Trent Simpson play those? But I really think it's going to be in the run game, navigating, kind of the flurry, making plays. That's where he struggled a little bit in Clemson and where I want to see the most growth. Familiar face coming back, Chris Board coming in as kind of a key special teamer after departing the Ravens for a few years. A guy that was around core Raven special teamer for a few years. So excited to have him back. Really kind of gives me some comfort. We know he can play a little bit of linebacker too if he needs to. But there's really not kind of a vet to step right into Trent Simpson's role if he struggles. Chris Board would probably be the closest. And, he struggled when he's had to play linebacker, but he's an ace special teamer. Josh Ross also provides another returning depth player, same type of role as Chris Board. There's kind of your two special teamers that can also play some linebacker. Josh Ross played really well as linebacker 2 preseasons ago. So I think he's going to get a lot of looks this preseason, sorry, and could really prove himself. And then you got 2 UDFAs. You got Deion Jennings at Rutgers. He led the team last year in tackles, had 251 during his career, 95 last year. He also had 12 pass breakups and an interception. So a guy that can play a little bit all over. He was kind of their Mike linebacker. And then a native of Turks and Caicos, we got Evander Rigby. Didn't play football until age 14, 35 games with the Temple Owls, had 205 tackles. These are your typical guys that you're going to bring in and hope to compete for a special team spot. They are really good at finding these guys. I mean, we found Josh Ross, we found Chris Board. Now you got 2 new guys coming in. They're looking at kind of practice squad viability. But when you guys kind of see what I mean with this group, like Smith, Simpson, Board, Ross seems like kind of an easy 4-man pick pending injuries to kind of move on and be on the 53-man roster. Moving into the cornerback group. So I didn't edit this. We just found out yesterday that Arthur Millette suffered an injury. Will miss the month of September, it sounded like. So he's going to miss some time. Obviously, I think he'll make the 53-man roster, end up on IR. I have to double check the rules. I think it's the normal kind of setup, but we'll have to double check those, see if that's how it works. If you kind of end up on 53-man and get put on IR, you can be designated to return. They switch things every year. I just want to make sure that that's still valid. But looking at kind of the top of the depth chart, you got Marlon Humphrey and Brandon Stevens. Lockdown outside corners, feel really good about them. You got Nate Wiggins coming in as a first-round pick, all that speed. And he's coming into a comfortable role. He doesn't have to step in and play right away, especially on the outside. But the big question is, what does this Arthur Millette injury do to this 3-man corner group? Does Marlon Humphrey move into the slot? Does Nate Wiggins play some in the slot? Does Pepe Williams step up? So it's going to be really interesting. We know Kyle Hamilton can come down and play some slot, but Arthur Millette always did play some true slot snaps. So I'm interested to see how they're going to cover this. But the pick of Nate Wiggins, again, can never have too many corners. Millette goes down, you lose kind of depth, but then it's like, okay, we have Nate Wiggins and Stevens that can play outside. Humphrey can play on the inside. That's a 3-man, kind of corner group that's very high level. Jalen Armour-Davis has had one hell of a camp. He needed it. If without it, he wasn't going to survive cut down day. I think Pepe Williams is also in that boat, but probably survived due to Arthur Millette's injury. He's kind of that true slot corner, will probably step into the Millette role behind potentially Marlo, potentially Nate, and potentially Kyle Hamilton, as they're going to probably deploy a few bodies in the slot role. But Armour-Davis has had one hell of a camp and kind of provides that depth. And just, again, a guy like Anthony Averett, Brandon Stevens, guys that took a few years and then it pays off. So really looking forward to see what he can do. TJ Tampa's coming off of sports hernia surgery. So that's really unfortunate. And, really want to get him out there for reps. But it sounds like he might actually be back in a couple weeks. So hopefully we'll get to see him in at least the 3rd preseason game if he can get up to speed. We got Trayvon Mullen coming back, a guy that is injured again, I believe, coming off that injury from last year. Ton of potential, but it's just injuries are getting in his way. Then we got Kadar Holman, practice squad guy since 2019, 6th-round pick. But he's had significant playing time before. He played basically one full season as a corner for the Packers. Christian Matthew was a 2022 7th-round pick from Valdosta State, who spent time with Cards and Bears. So again, the Ravens are going out finding these vets similar to on the D-line, where these guys are going to play a ton of snaps this preseason. Guys with experience. It really does play into why the Ravens have success in the preseason games. They like to round out their roster with these veterans that they can try and keep around if injuries do happen. So I love the way they kind of always set this team up. And, I'm looking forward to seeing what these guys can do. Moving into the safety room, again, another boring one. You got Kyle Hamilton, Marcus Williams, one of the best safety duos in the NFL. Marcus Williams has taken so much criticism, played all of last year with a torn pec. I don't think people realize how insane that is. If you guys watched when Tony Jefferson was on with me, he talked about it, how insane it was that he was even playing, let alone insane that he was getting criticized by fans. So, he's going to be healthy. He's going to have his arm back. He's going to be able to tackle. And when he makes plays on the ball, he'll be able to use his second hand to get an interception. So I'm really looking forward to seeing him. And then Kyle Hamilton. I mean, what can you say about this guy? He's elite. Like, he's already elite. 2 years in, a lot like Tyler Linderbaum, he just took that massive step last year, getting into the best of the best. And a guy that I do think is a defensive player of the year candidate. I think he's going to be one of the best players on this defense, one of the best players on this team. And I can't wait to watch this duo. They went out and brought in Eddie Jackson as some depth to kind of replace that role vacated by Geno Stone, who went to the Bengals. What's up with our guys leaving to rivals? And he'll kind of compete with our Darius Washington for that third safety role, which we rolled quite a bit because using Kyle Hamilton as a chess piece, you want to be able to have those two high looks. Go out and get Eddie Jackson, who can kind of play that role. Eddie Jackson's taken a huge step back from what he was as an all-pro, but he's a guy that I think at a limited role, which is what Geno Stone was in last year. Not that it was limited, but he was in an easier role being surrounded by all this talent in the secondary. I think that's going to really help Eddie Jackson stay in a simple role, play his, kind of limited piece, and do really well. So excited to see him. Our Darius Washington, much like some of these other guys we've talked about, he just can't stay healthy. Ton of talent there. Team loves him. We just need him to stay healthy, and I think he'll make an impact this year. Then we got Daryl Worley, kind of that trusty vet, the guy that's been on practice squad so much. He's been able to come in and play when the Ravens have needed him. Just love having that security there. And then Sanusi Kane, a guy that was kind of like a core special teamer, a weird 7th-round pick. I knew the team loved Bo Braid. It was interesting they got him as a UDFA and didn't draft him because I had heard in the 5th round that they were eyeing him, and then they end up getting him UDFA. Nobody drafts him. So you got those two kind of competing for a spot, but Sanusi Kane might have the leg up there due to just that core special teams role. Like that's what he's here for. He's going to be a sure tackler. I just don't think he has a whole lot of coverage chops, whereas Bo Braid is that kind of guy that could play a little bit more safety, maybe a little less special teams. So it's really going to come down to that special teams. And we get into the prediction here, and I won't lie to you guys, it's kind of boring. On the D-line, I got the 5-man core that we talked about, all 5 returned from last year. In the linebacker core, we return Smith and Trenton Simpson. No surprise there. Starting Mike, starting Will. 2 core special teamers and Ross and Board. I just don't see those UDFAs upsetting them. On the outside linebacker spot, we have Owe, Van Noy, Ojabo, Harrison, Robinson, Isak. Obviously, if Isak can't get healthy, that might play in. We might see a guy like Joe Evans take that spot. But if he doesn't end up on any sort of injury, and I think they'll keep Malik Harrison because they won't go with 5 linebackers. So that's kind of your 5th inside linebacker and 6th outside linebacker. Position versatility, special teams role seems like a slam dunk. He'll be on the team. Then we're keeping 5 safeties with Sanusi Kane taking that spot from Bo Braid, again, due to special teams. And, again, boring in the cornerback group if TJ Tampa's healthy enough. Obviously, Arthur Millette will make the 53-man roster. I then expect him to be waived. You might see a guy like Daryl Worley take that spot and our Darius Washington play more of a corner role, or you might see them go and get one of those corners, one of those vet guys that can kind of be that back end of the roster. So I won't lie to you guys. This is a boring 53-man prediction. I have basically no upsets. If I had to pick one, it'd be Joe Evans making it over Isak or CJ Ravenall making it over. You can't cut Broderick Washington. So it's hard for me to elevate those guys. I think there's going to be a ton of competition. I think practice squad cut downs are going to be really hard, but between Sanusi Kane, Bo Braid, that's probably one of your biggest camp battles. And then just guys fighting injuries. I just don't see where the upsets come from. So sorry if that's boring for you guys, but I can't create drama. I have to give you guys my honest opinion. So that's what I have for you guys today. Drop a comment down below. Let me know what you guys think. Who am I missing out on? Who do you think is going to make it? And also just let me know overall what you guys are thinking. Hit that like button, hit subscribe if you're new here. And again, thank you to BetUS for sponsoring this video. Be good to yourselves, be good to each other. Peace out, everyone.